Hello, and welcome to Historical Humans Reads, where we take primary sources and bring them to your screen. I'm Colum Coleman, and today we are reading from a dark and timeless novel that emerged in the early years of post-World War II Japan. Published in 1948, the same year as the author's self-imposed death, this modern classic truly explores the all-too-human struggle for belonging through the life of a young man who never found it. The novel is, of course, No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. Born Shuji Tsushima, Dazai was one of the most prolific Japanese authors of all time. Today we will be reading from Chapter 1 of No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. With that, let's begin. Mine has been a life of much shame. I can't even guess myself what it must be to live the life of a human being. I was born in a village in the Northeast, and it wasn't until I was quite big that I saw my first train. I climbed up and down the station bridge, quite unaware that its function was to permit people to cross from one track to another. I was convinced that the bridge had been provided to lend an exotic touch and to make the station premises a place of pleasant diversity, like some foreign playground. I remained under this delusion for quite a long time, and it was for me a very refined amusement, indeed, to climb up and down the bridge. I thought that it was one of the most elegant services provided by the railways, when later I discovered that the bridge was nothing more than a utilitarian device. I lost all interest in it. Again, when as a child I saw photographs of subway trains in picture books, it never occurred to me that they had been invented out of practical necessity. I could only suppose that riding underground instead of on the surface must be a novel and delightful pastime. I have been sickly ever since I was a child, and have frequently been confined to bed. How often, as I lay there, I used to think what uninspired decorations sheets and pillowcases make. It wasn't until I was about 20 that I realized they actually served a practical purpose. And this revelation of human dullness stirred dark depression in me. Again, I have never known what it means to be hungry. I don't mean by this statement that I was raised in a well-to-do family. I have no such banal intent. I mean that I have not the remotest idea of the nature of the sensation of hunger. It sounds peculiar to say it, but I have never been aware that my stomach was empty. When, as a boy, I returned home from school, the people at home would make a great fuss over me. You must be hungry. Remember what it's like. How terribly hungry you feel by the time you get home from school. How about some jelly beans? There's cake and biscuits, too. Seeking to please, as I invariably did, I would mumble that I was hungry and stuff a dozen jelly beans in my mouth. But what they meant by feeling hungry completely escaped me. Of course, I do eat a great deal all the same, but I have almost no recollection of ever having done so out of hunger. Unusual or extravagant things tempt me, and when I go to the house of somebody else, I eat almost everything put before me, even if it takes some effort. As a child, the most painful part of the day was unquestionably mealtime, especially in my own home. At my house in the country, the whole family, we were about 10 in number, ate together, lined up in two facing rows at a table. Being the youngest child, I naturally sat at the end. The dining room was dark, and the sight of 10 or more members of the household eating their lunch or whatever that meal was in gloomy silence was enough to send chills through me. Besides, this was an old-fashioned country household where the food was more or less prescribed, and it was useless even to hope for unusual or extravagant dishes. I dreaded mealtime more each day. I would sit there at the end of the table in the dimly lit room, and, trembling all over as with cold, I would lift a few morsels of food to my mouth and push them in. Why must human beings eat 3 meals every single day? What extraordinarily solemn faces they all make as they eat. It seems to be some kind of ritual. 3 times every day at the regulated hour, the family gathers in this gloomy room. The places are all laid out in the proper order, and, regardless of whether we're hungry or not, we munch our food in silence with lowered eyes. Who knows? It may be an act of prayer to propitiate whatever spirits may be lurking around the house. At times I went so far as to think in such terms. Eat or die, the saying goes. But to my ears, it sounded like just one more unpleasant threat. Nevertheless, this superstition, I could only think of it as such, always aroused doubt and fear in me. Nothing was so hard for me to understand, so baffling, and at the same time so filled with menacing overtones as the commonplace remark: human beings work to earn their bread, for if they don't eat, they die. In other words, you might say that I still have no understanding of what makes human beings tick. My apprehension on discovering that my concept of happiness seemed to be completely at variance with that of everyone else was so great as to make me toss sleeplessly and groan night after night in my bed. It drove me indeed to the brink of lunacy. I wonder if I have actually been happy. People have told me, really more times than I can remember, ever since I was a small boy, how lucky I was. But I have always felt as if I were suffering in hell. It has seemed to me, in fact, that those who call me lucky were incomparably more fortunate than I. This has been an excerpt from No Longer Human on Historical Humans Reads. If you enjoyed this video and would like to hear more excerpts from original texts, please subscribe to be notified of the next one. If there is a work you would like to hear, be sure to like the video and leave a comment listing it below. Thank you for listening.